Hi, you're watching Talking About It. I'm John Griffith.
I'm Cara Kilduff.
And
tonight we also have Charles is it Castillo or Castillo?
Casillo.
Casillo.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's no T. That's right. And it's been like a couple of years since you've been on the show last.
Yes, it has been.
It's good to have
The
you
only
back.
difference is you have a beard.
Yeah.
The last time you didn't.
I know. Well, I've been growing it since then.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's finally filling in.
Yeah, I see that. You stop it. So you're here tonight we're talking about your latest book.
Yes.
Charles is a screenwriter, he's an author, he's an actor. You're kind of like, you've got your hands in a lot of pots.
Yeah, when you're creative and you're starting from the bottom, you've got to.
Yeah.
Nowadays especially, you've got to put your energy here, you got to put your energy there. You've got to see what sticks. Throw it all against the wall, and then you see what sticks.
So the latest book is this your second book about Marilyn Monroe?
This is my second book about Marilyn Monroe, but it's my first biography. My first one was a fictitious recreation of her.
Okay.
I did it actually in the diary format, like as if her lost diary was found. Mm-hmm. But I've always been fascinated with Marilyn, and it was a natural progression that I would go to, doing a full-fledged biography, dealing with a lot of research and talking to people, and really being a little bit of a detective too.
That must have been fun, though.
Well, she's a lifelong obsession of mine.
I love her. Oh, I love her.
When you're creative, you're always looking, or not really looking for a muse. Usually they find you somehow. And when I was very young, I found Marilyn, or Marilyn found me. I was flipping through a magazine, and I saw a picture of her. And I knew who Marilyn Monroe was, but I had never really, at 11, she died before we were born.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I didn't really know anything about her, except for maybe seeing a few clips on television here and there. But there was something about the mixture of the article, which was very negative, and the photo of her that just hypnotized me, bewitched me. I had to find out more. Now, this is going back to the days when there was no internet.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So it was very unusual for a guy from Queens, New York, Italian-American family, to be so interested in a movie star who's been dead for so many years. I thought I was the only one. But through the years and through the internet and traveling and everything, I found that it's a very common story. I mean, a lot of people look at Marilyn Monroe and they say, oh, pretty actress, dumb blonde or whatever. But there's others, and some, Hollywood people like I think Drew Barrymore and Colin Farrell, they had like a very similar thing. Like she's like a siren when they were very young. She called to them something about her they just related to.
So you're part of the tribe, really.
I'm one of them. I mean, I'm one of many. I'm not like it's like I said, the two. There's a pretty actress, yeah, cool. But the other ones that like just, she's been a real inspiration to me, a real muse. I think that whatever I do, I have a little bit of Marilyn in it. Whatever I create.
Well, there's just something, excuse me, there's just something about her, like the image that we are presented, and then when you read any biographies about her, or just you get these somewhat intimate details about her. It's just kind of like I always felt for her, like, oh, like she didn't have anybody who was really looking out for her.
Yeah,
Right. Most people know the persona, not the person.
Right.
And she was one of the early people who actually developed a brand, which is essential today.
She was a genius at, branding herself and marketing herself. Her PR, she was better than any PR firm could be, just her own personal PR. But it's interesting what you say about, wanting to protect her. That's one of the ingredients in her makeup. I mean, it's like she's almost like a cocktail. When people always ask me, what is it about her? What is it about Marilyn Monroe that we're still talking about her and people are still interested over 50 years? And I think it's like we're all different. We're all different characteristics. We're all made up of different things. And when we combine it all, that's basically who we are. With Marilyn, the combination just was perfect. I mean, she had a vulnerability, she had a sensuality, she had a wit, her physical appeal, her talent, and when you shook it all up, it just came out perfect. I mean, it's like we've been trying to recreate her ever since she's been gone, many actresses, and we just can't come up with that recipe.
Yep. I remember there was a biography about her that was written by Lee Strasbourg's daughter.
Oh, yes.
And that was when I read that, I don't know, I was in middle school or high school. I think I was in high school, and I got it from the library, and I read it, and I couldn't put it down.
Susan Strasbourg.
Yeah, yes, that was the one. And it was just, oh my gosh, there were so many details, and that's when I was just like, oh my gosh, this woman, like, who really loved her, like who really was looking out for her, because it didn't seem like there were many people.
No, I mean, it was hard. Susan Strasbourg is an interesting book because she actually knew her.
Yeah.
She's one of the few people who actually, wrote a book. It was really like a memoir about her experiences with her. Her father was the great teacher, the great Lee Strasbourg, and that's what Marilyn would do, though, through her life. She would latch on to different families. She was always looking for a family. She was born illegitimately. She was raised in foster care and orphanages, and always looking for a family, particularly a father. But she would latch on to them, and when she met the Strasbourgs in New York studying, they kind of took her in. I think one of the problems when you say that no one really looked out for her was like, people may have genuinely went in wanting to help her, but she became so big, so monstrous. Her fame became so, no one knew fame like that before. I mean, she was more than just a superstar. She was like the standard of what we judge beauty by in her day. I mean, it's a tremendous power, and it's a tremendous burden to put on somebody. So I think people would start wanting to help her, and then they would get so caught up in this business of Marilyn Monroe, and and then they started to think, well, how could I use this power? How could I channel her power? And they wound up in their own way, maybe not intentionally, but using her too.
Yeah. I was asking you before we came back, the photograph is really beautiful, and you said it was taken a few weeks before. It was one of the last photos taken of her?
Yes, she was trying to change her image in her last year. She had just turned 36 in 1962, and in those days, a woman was considered over the hill, especially if she was a sex symbol. I mean, today we can't even imagine 36 is like a baby, but in those days they were considered, over, and the press was saying that she was over. And she was having a hard time finding how she was going to transition. What was she going to be? So she did a shoot for Vogue, and this was one of the photos in high fashion. And she actually died before it hit the stand. They printed only photos of her in very couture dresses and gowns. But it's interesting because she did that, but she ended up nude by the end of the session because she always, in her insecurity, always felt that's what they want. Let me give them what they want. So while she started these particular sessions, it was a two period. On the second period, they started her in complete fashion, complete elegance, and she ended up nude. The nudes are beautiful, but it's kind of sad that she thought that that's still the only way that she can find her acceptance. Yeah.
So
what do you think? In her last year, what did you think that she? Well, what was one of the most interesting things about her when you were researching the book that you really wanted to explore more?
I always knew that she was sad, but I didn't know how completely unhappy and in despair she was. And I think that it's hard for people to understand that because she gives us so much joy when you look at her or you watch her movies. But she was really, there was something. I think she was extremely sensitive, and when sensitive people are hurt early on, some people could overcome it. I don't think she could ever overcome. She was sexually abused as a child in the foster care system. She never knew who her father was. Her father repeatedly in adulthood, she knew who he was, would never see her. He said, "See my lawyers." As you said, she always felt people were using her. And I think in that last year, it just was all, it was just all coming down because the age factor, and so I think it was really unhappy she was, especially in that last year, because she said, when a reporter asked her if she was happy, she said, "I have moments of happiness, but if I'm generally anything, I'm generally miserable."
Oh.
And it was an honest response because that's basically what she fought against. So in researching the book, I got a hold of some of her psychiatric notes, which are embargoed. You can't see them, but I got them through secret channels and saw. So reading her psychiatrist's correspondence and seeing some of the notes he said on her, she was first of all, she was very emotionally disturbed. Very, very. She could pull herself together, like many emotionally disturbed people, for long periods of time and enough to maybe complete a movie, although it was hell to work with her. But she would fall apart often, you know, and take time to rebuild herself again.
That's, yeah, I mean, we know now a lot more about mental illness than we did back then.
Right.
So,
and, you know, her last doctor said that many years later, he didn't talk about it for years, but many years after her death, he said that today she would be considered bipolar, manic depressive. Back then, they didn't really have that many ways to deal with it. They really didn't understand it that well. And I think what they did is mostly tranquilize her manic episodes.
Yeah.
And so she was very tranquilized most of the time, and she became very dependent on downers and sleeping pills. But as far as the general unhappiness, it was interesting because when the book came out in the summer, I was doing some appearances, and I had to do a TV appearance that was fairly big, and I looked really awful for my own personal reasons. I just looked really terrible, and I knew I did. And you know, when you try to look better, you just make it worse because you exaggerate everything that's wrong. And I said, I was feeling insecure, and I said, oh, my friends are going to see this, and they're going to say, what happened to him? He looks terrible. And I always go back to Marilyn when I'm talking about Marilyn. So I thought, how did she feel in the summer of '62 when everyone in the press and in the media was saying she's done? Imagine, like, I'm not a sex symbol, and I'm not known for my looks, but imagine your whole career and your whole personality was based on your physical looks. And the press and the media are saying, you're done, you're over, you're 36, you're posing nude, you're desperate. I can't imagine what she would, like every time she went somewhere, they were saying, oh, look, she gained weight, or oh, look, she lost weight, or oh, look, her roots are coming in, or oh, look, her fingernails are dirty. I mean, I can't imagine being so judged as she, like I said, she became a standard. So how judged she was just on her physical appeal. When she felt she was losing it, she felt she was going to lose everything she had built because it was so much based on that.
mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, that's what we do to our icons. We build them up so high, and we take. Unfortunately, so many people take joy in knocking them down once we put them up there. And,
That's true.
And it's a sad.
It is sad, and it was like for a headline, you know. I mean, I think that the media was all devastated when she passed. But when she was alive, they could have been a little kinder to her. Mm-hmm. She needed it, and you know, it was you know, well, they were very different to women back then. It wasn't just Marilyn. Like when Doris Day was getting older, they would review her looks, you know, how she was aging and she can't be the girl next door anymore. And I was reading reviews on Brigitte Bardot, and it was like, I remember reading a review for Brigitte Bardot, and it was like, well, she still looks good in some scenes, but in other scenes she's starting to show her age. And I was like, you know, you won't get. I don't think you'd get away with it too much today. But back in the 50s and 60s, when a woman was based, you know, they weren't allowed to be different things. Marilyn wasn't allowed to be anything. She wanted to be all these things. She wanted to be a businesswoman. She wanted to be a great actress. She wanted to be sexy. She wanted to be beautiful. But they said, no, you're just sexy and beautiful. That's it. You're not allowed to be anything else. They put her in a little container and they won't let her out.
What do you, if she hadn't died when she did, what do you think she would have done? Like, how do you think she would have?
I would like to think that she'd go to Europe, where they would have been a little bit more respectful of her and appreciated her more. She probably wouldn't have had the commercial, you know, through the roof success mantra, but she might have done some interesting work and gotten some interesting roles. I don't know if that would have been enough for her, because once you have a taste of that kind of fame, it's hard to lose it. But she would have had to pull herself together. She was in that last year, she was very emotionally ill. She was having trouble facing the cameras. I mean, she didn't complete her last film. She got fired from it because she just wasn't showing up.
Wasn't George Cukor directing that one?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I remember they had, it was a bunch of years ago, they had a TV special when they used to have those of scenes from that last film. Yeah. And with her death, because we kind of touched on it briefly before the camera started, but with her dying, like I made a crack remark about her being murdered, and you were like, well, I don't know about that. So because there is such a, controversy over how she died, and so what do you think?
With my research, and my research goes over decades, not just the years that I was working on the book, I don't believe that she was murdered. I understand why people do, because there was a lot of mystery. She died within a lot of mystery. She was living a very mysterious life in her last year. And I think that a lot of people had a hand in making her feel very bad and neglecting her and using her and abusing her. And I think that all played in. So, yeah, people had a hand in her, but I don't, in her death. But I don't think that anyone went in there with a poisonous enema or a needle to the heart or anything like that. There was really no need to kill her. If we're going to talk about the Kennedys, they could have, she was in a mental institution the year before. If she came, like people say, she was going to give a press conference, she was going to blow the lid off of them, and she was going to tell them about the affairs. First of all, that wasn't her style. I think that does her a disservice because it wasn't her style to talk about people. She never talked about any of her ex-husbands or her romances with, like, say, Frank Sinatra. She was very tight-lipped about that. She had class. So she wouldn't have given a press conference. And second of all, they could have, if she did do that, which she wouldn't have, but they could have just said she's out of her mind. She got out of the Payne Whitney Clinic last year. Let's put her back in. She's crazy. She's a crazy lady. So there was no need to kill her. And, you know, she was very sad. She was addicted to pills. And she had tried to kill herself in the past. I'm not saying on this night it was intentional. She may have been taking a lot of pills because she was very angry and depressed that night. And she may have taken too much and then woken up and forgot how much she took and then took some more. But I do think that it could, if she didn't do it that night, it probably, or may have happened 2 weeks later or a month later. Yeah. She was in bad shape that last year.
It's difficult, and like I said before, I said mental illness is no joke. And if you have so many outside forces just chipping away at your sense of self-worth and your psyche, there's gonna be a reaction somewhere down the line, and through self-medication, it had its toll. I mean, I knew somebody in my life who, every once in a while she would deliberately take some extra pills and, took for the attention, and then one day she took one too many and didn't wake up. So I'm not saying that that's the case, but that's the type of mental instability
a cry
that can
for
play
help.
a role. Yeah,
a cry for help. And I don't know if her attempts before that were cries for help, where she was serious about it, but she did a number of times. I mean, when she was married to Arthur Miller, he took her in. She was on the window ledge, and he pulled her in. So it's little things like that you find out when you're working on a book.
Wow, I never heard that story.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, she had very dark moods. She would get very, very dark. I mean, one of her poems is something like, "Help, help, help, I feel life coming closer when all I want to do is die."
Oh, wow.
I mean, that was the kind of frame of mind she was in sometimes.
Oof.
That's just another layer that most people might not know that they'll find out in your book.
Yeah, I hope so.
It is a beautiful book, by the way. Look at this. This is like a legit publisher. This is like...
At St. Martin's Press. I'm very happy to have the book with St. Martin's Press. They're wonderful.
That's a big deal, dude.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. Oh.
And it's definitely worth picking up.
I did find out a lot of things that no one knew before. When telling her story, there's the things that we know, and you have to put that in. But I think I added to a lot of the stories about her and a lot of the things that we understood. I think I went a little deeper in the understanding. I lived with her basically in my head for a really long time. I went to see a psychiatrist towards the end of writing the book, not for me, but to talk about mental illness. And when I was talking about Marilyn and telling him about his life, at the end of the session, his name is Jared, he's a friend, he said, "Are you dreaming about her?" And I said, I dream about her sometimes. He said, because this is really dark material to be living with. I mean, day after day, and reading about it and researching it, and it was.
And your own body has to process it somehow, so it comes out that way.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
Again, it's just the filters of the mind and how your mind and her mind merged as you were doing your prep.
It's so many years after her death now, so I had to find new people that were still alive. They were in their 80s and 90s. Who never talked before. But then I had to go back and the people that were dead and listen to interviews that other writers had done. And listening, I would go into the library in Los Angeles where they have the special rooms where writers donated their stuff, and with the headphones on and listen to the interviews and transcribe, and I'd come out like staggering out of the library at night at the end of the day, like just so overwhelmed with what they were saying about her and things that I had never heard before and things that I were finding out. And the people that were closest to her knew how magical she could be, how wonderful she could be, how seductive she could be, how bewitching she could be, but also how down she could be and how dark she could get.
And a lot of that hasn't filtered into the writing, so it's wonderful that you're bringing the existing information in a new light, plus the additional information that you researched and brought to it. So I'm grateful that you were able to do that.
Thank you. I feel it's like a puzzle. One of those 500 piece puzzles with the little pieces, and you're piecing it together.
Where does this fucking piece go? I was in Los Angeles for 6 weeks in 2017, and I went to Grauman's Chinese Theater, and that was one of the things I had to see was her. And
Yes. Yeah.
And I can't remember. I don't think I got to go. I wanted to see her grave. I saw Judy Garland's, but I think I didn't get a chance to go to where Marilyn Monroe is interred because I really wanted to see that.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of other people around her, like Natalie Wood,
Yeah.
and I think Farrah Fawcett is there now. And
Yeah. So the next time I go out there, I need to go hit the other cemetery because have always been fascinated by the old movie stars.
Me too. Me too. They were my best friends when I was growing up.
And you know what you were saying about how they judged women so harshly. I mean, they still do, but not as bad as then. But like, remember when Greta Garbo got older and they were like, oh well,
She stopped making. She went the route of just stop making movies. She was 36 too, by the way.
Yeah.
She made her last movie when she was 36, and she just, traveled. I wish that Marilyn would have done that. Maybe she could have done something like that. She just traveled, and she just had her friends, and she was reclusive.
Yeah.
But if you saw a picture of her, she was wearing a floppy hat and sunglasses.
Yeah.
But it's funny. It was another movie. It was a movie I can't remember which one it was, but it spoke of the 3 stages of a female actress in that sort of day. There's ingenue, there's young mother, and there's district attorney.
Well, there wouldn't be a district attorney in that day, but it would have been ingenue, leading lady, and then mother and grandmother,
Yeah.
or Dottie aunt or something like that. Marilyn, they would have probably had playing the Dottie old aunt because she was, known as a dizzy blonde. They wouldn't have, well, maybe because the 60s it got kind of out of the studio system. She might have. I'd like to see maybe she would have done The Graduate, in the Anne Bancroft role. I mean, Anne Bancroft is wonderful, but I'm just thinking Marilyn, that an older, sexy role. I mean, she might have been quite something, and it might have started a whole new thing for her.
And too, I wonder, like, if this is all speculation, but I wonder if she had gotten the right mental health care, and like today, there's so many different ways to help people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If she finally would have felt okay.
Yeah, with the antidepressants and stuff today, I mean, I think it would have helped her a great deal. And I just think, it's like I said, it's a different age. I mean, this was totally before any sniff of women's liberation, and feminism. It just wasn't. It wasn't around. I mean,
Right.
women, especially not especially, but we're talking in the essence of Marilyn, in the studio system, they were treated. They really were treated slavishly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were property.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And they wouldn't let them branch out or get out of their once they were like a money making machine.
Yeah.
This is what makes money. And then when they were all used up, it had happened to the one before Marilyn at her studio, 20th Century Fox, was Betty Grable.
Yeah.
She made them all this money for like 12 years, and then Marilyn came on the scene, was younger, and they moved Betty Grable out of her dressing room and moved Marilyn Monroe into it. And Betty Grable very graciously said, honey, I've had it. Now it's your turn. You go get what you can get. But Marilyn didn't want to have 10 years and then be cast aside. That's why she was like trying to do things like form her own company and branch out to other kinds of roles.
It's like they were typecast.
Yes.
This is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah, they don't tell you that stuff when you go on a studio tour. That's not happening.
Well, we love them. I mean, we love Doris Day as the happy sunshine girl
Yeah.
next door, and we love Marilyn and Gentlemen for Blondes and Some Like It Hot. But, today, if it was set up the way it is today, they could have formed their own companies and gone to other studios to work, not just the studios they were working for, and it would have, they just have more control over
And
their
there are more
careers
outlets
now.
now, and television isn't as pigeonholed as it was at the time, and there's so many different levels of television now, and the quality in the right places is just there. A lot of times, there's more quality on premium television than there is.
Absolutely.
In the
All the good
theaters.
work now is being done on cable television.
Yep.
I think all the good writing, all the good acting.
And you can, the contracts are shorter now.
And they're less slavish, where Marilyn had contracts where she had towards the end she was allowed to make one film outside of the studio, but she had to make, before she could do that one, she had to do one here, and it was just they gave her crappy material, even after she proved herself to be, you know, able to do more. They were still giving her, you know, flimsy kind of comedies.
I wonder too, like with you know, all the actors and actresses that were in Hollywood around the you know, the era of the big studios, what they could have accomplished if that wasn't so. Like, get out of the typecasting. Like, you know, like what other kind of material?
Well, like Cary Grant, I mean, he made that movie called Suspicion. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where he's married to Joan Fontaine, and she's like, the suspicion, she's suspicious he might be a murderer, he might not be a murderer, he might be a cheater, he might be stealing her money. And in the book, he does kill her.
Okay.
But in the movie, they weren't allowed to do it because Cary Grant can't kill someone. So it was a Hitchcock movie, and they had to tack on this happy ending at the end that comes out of nowhere.
Oh no, not for a Hitchcock movie.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, we'll go back to Mildred Pierce also with Crawford. They had to add in. I can't remember the plot line, but it just deviated from the source material so much because it was Joan Crawford. So, and it's,
Was it Myrna Loy and Cary Grant? It was some movie where they hated each other at the beginning. I think it was those two actors. Anyway, it was an old movie. It was on TV one night a while ago, and I was like, this is fantastic.
Yeah, I love the old stuff.
Oh,
I love the old stuff.
So good. And then the pre-Hays Code movies.
Oh.
That's some good stuff.
Yes, definitely.
Really good stuff. Oh.
but I am really grateful that you were able to come and visit us again.
I loved it. I love being here.
Are you living out there now?
No, I just recently moved back, so I'm here again for a while. I'm working on a new book, and so maybe I'll be back. This is like the 10-year challenge. Like I can go back and look at my appearances on here and see how I've aged.
Well, you know what? I think you're full of crap. You're a very handsome man, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, like you were saying, you're not. I was like thinking to myself, what is he crazy? Has he looked at himself?
Oh, that
But
makes me
wait, can you
feel
tell
good.
us what book you're working on?
It's actually Elizabeth Taylor. But it's
Really?
not her biography. It's more, well, it is her biography, but it's focusing on her capacity for friendship and relationships, how deep she went. I found out a lot while working on this book about her. So I'm going to focus on her relationships rather than her career.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
She seemed like a really good person.
She was a really good person. There's a story in the book about how she reached out to try to help Marilyn. And that's what made me thinking about, wow, I never knew that. It's revealed for the first time in my book, so that made me think, I got to find out more about Elizabeth Taylor.
And so do we when you come back next time, is that hopefully to
I
talk
hope
about what
so.
you're working
I
on.
can't wait to read that. Like this, wait, you can buy this like in bookstores, on Amazon.
Yes,
like,
yes, it's all over.
everywhere. Oh,
Thank
that's
you so
cool.
much. Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much. You always make me feel so good.
It's always great to have you, and it's always great to have you. Thank you for joining us. I am John Griffith,
I'm Cara Kilduff.
and we will see you next time. Hey.
You know what? Your eyes always sparkle.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. That's why I love talking to you. Like.